All right, so in the last episode, what we did was we used get server-side props to actually fetch the API to give us all of the guilds, but we didn't actually do anything with it. All we did was we just returned this API call. Okay, or we returned this call, which called the API, and we validated the cookie, and we were able to get the props, right? Or we were able to get the guilds, but we returned it as props. But what we need to do now is we need to actually be able to reference the props. So how do we do that? Well, when you use get server-side props, you'll actually get this object called props, right? And you can actually reference the guilds on here, but because we're using TypeScript, we have to type annotate this. So what I'll do is I'll do type. Actually, before I do that, let me just show you real quick. Before I do anything, I just want to show you what it looks like. So if I console log props, and if I go into the browser, if I refresh, open up the console, you're going to see that we have this object and it has this guilds property. Okay, so that's the magic of get server-side props, is it pretty much populates our props object for us so we can just reference guilds. Okay, let me just quickly type annotate this. So we'll do type props equals guilds, and this is just an array of guild types. Okay, and then since the next page is generic, I can just simply wrap props in between angle brackets like this. So next page, angle brackets, props. So now props, I can reference props.guilds and it will work just fine. So I'm just going to destructure that right over here. Okay, and if I want to, I could just do a simple guilds.map, right? This is some basic React stuff over here. And then you just render out a div, and then, you know, it's pretty straightforward from here. Let's see. So for example, key g.id, and then we'll do g.name for the guild name. And if you look over here, if I refresh, you're gonna see that let's see what's going on. We got an error. There we go. All right, there we go. So I think that was from my previous error, but it's okay. So if I refresh now, you can see that the data is there. And this is the beauty of server-side rendering, because it just appears on there. Like if we were using client-side rendering, where we use use effect and we had to call the API and then show like a loading spinner, right? It would take, you know, it would obviously show the user like that it's still fetching the data, right? Like it, but for server-side rendering, we have all data already rendered on the server side, and it just gets sent to the client, and it just gets loaded in the browser as a whole HTML document, which is really nice. Okay, so that's great. Now let's go back to our code and let's just style our component up. Okay, because right now obviously this doesn't look super great, so let's go ahead and style it up. So what I'll do for the menu page is I'm going to go ahead and actually give this div the class name of page. Okay, so I'll apply the global styles, which really it's just going to apply mostly the padding, because we already have the background color and the text color ready. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a module, a CSS module. So index.module.scss. Okay, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to have two CSS classes in here. So I'm just going to have a container, which is just going to have fixed width, and then a margin 0 auto, which is going to center that div in the middle. And then I'm going to have just another class called title, which is just going to set the font weight to 400. It's just really simple stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'm going to take my div, or I'm going to create a new div, and I'm going to give this div a class name, and we're going to pass in the style.container prop. And then what I'm going to do first is, before I give the class name, let's import our CSS module. So let's call the styles from index.module.scss. And now we can pass in the class name, which is just going to be styles.container. That's how you use CSS modules. Okay, so now that we're done with that, let's go ahead and do an H1, and we'll do the same. It'll be styles.title. And we'll write, please select a guild. Okay, and if I go back to the page, you're going to see that it's in the center now. Please select the guild. We were zoomed in a little bit, so that's why it looked like it was left aligned, but it's actually in the center. Okay, cool. So now that we have that done, let's go back, and what we need to do is we need to style up the actual guilds component, because right now we don't actually have a component, so we'll create one. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm gonna go inside this components over here, and I'll create a folder for guilds, I guess. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but as long as you just create, you know, a folder just so we can group together everything. And I'll create a file called guild menu item.tsx. Okay, and then inside here, this is basically just going to render out our guild menu item. So we're actually going to pass in the guild prop in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the component. So export const. Let's see, move this over here. So export const guild menu item. Okay, and then it's just going to return some JSX. All right, so let's first handle the props first. So guild menu item is going to take in a prop, and that prop is just going to be a guild type. And I'll just type annotate this over here. I'll use the FC, and then since this is a generic type, I'll just pass some props like that. So FC stands for function component. Okay, so this is a good way just to type annotate your functional components if you want to. You don't have to do it this way, but I like doing it this way sometimes. So I can now take in guild like that. Okay, so the guild menu item component will obviously have its own styles as well, so we'll implement that. So let's go into here. Let's create an index.module.scss file as well. And we're going to have our own styles for this component. So I'll have a container, and the container class will be for this div over here. So let me go ahead and import styles from index.module.scss. Okay. And remember, this is coming from this index.module.scss. Okay. And so let me just go ahead and give the class name right now. Might as well. All right, cool. Now, for the styling, all we'll do is we'll just have some basic styles. Like, it's not gonna be anything super crazy. So let's go ahead into our container class, and let's go ahead and set a border of 1 pixels solid. And then for the color, it'll be 434343. It can be whatever color you want. I'll set the padding to 20 pixels, top and bottom, 32 pixels left and right. There's going to be a margin of 10 pixels, top and bottom, 0 left and right. So every single guild menu item will have spacing in between because of the margin. I'll set the border radius to be 8 pixels. The cursor will be a pointer, so when we hover over it, it'll actually like show like, you know, a pointer cursor. And then last but not least, we'll set the display to flex. We'll justify the content to space between, and then align items to center. Okay. I know that was a lot, but don't worry, you'll see exactly what it's gonna look like. So inside this guild menu item, we're going to need to render the guild icon as well as the guild name. Okay, so to actually get the guild icon, we need to actually do something with the next config, and I'll show you in just a second how we can do that. Okay, but for now, let me just show you what it looks like right now if we were to just render out the name, just so you can see the component at the very least. Okay, I forgot we need to actually render out guild menu item, which we haven't yet, so let's go and do that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and right over here, I'm going to keep the div, but I'm just going to go ahead and do pass in guild menu item, and then for guild, I'll just pass in G, like that. And I'm just going to rename G to guild. I'll just kind of like doing a shorthand real quick, but it's fine. All right, cool, perfect. So let's go back to our browser, and you can see that this is what the components look like. Okay, pretty simple. Again, nothing super crazy. You can always change this up yourself. All right, now let's get the actual guild icon, because that's the important part. How do we actually do that? Well, with Next.js, you can actually use the Next.js's built-in image package. So instead of using like, you know, the default image tag, right, that's part of HTML, it's highly recommended you use the Next.js's image component because it's optimized for your website. Now, there are some things that you need to make sure you have configured. So you need to make sure you have a height. So we'll do 55 for the height, and width we'll do 55 as well. I'll also set a class name to styles.image, which is just going to have a border radius. So let me go into the CSS file. It's just going to have a border radius, so it looks like a circle. And then we're going to give it the alt tag, which is just going to be guild.name. You can pass in whatever alt tag you want, whatever you want for the alt attribute. Okay, now the thing that we need is the source, right? We need the actual URL for the guild icon, and I'm going to show you how we can get that. Okay, so every single icon, every single like image asset, they're all hosted by the Discord app CDN. Like for example, not all, but I know majority of them, if not all actually. So icons, avatars, they're all hosted on the Discord CDN. So you can actually just go to the cdn.discordapp.com. So for example, it would look like this, right? cdn.discordapp.com, and then you would pass in for the path. You'd pass in the resource that you want. So in our case, we want icons, right? So we want icons. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the guild ID after that. So let me actually just do this real quick. Let me just copy this. And I'll just hard code it for now. So we're going to pass in the guild ID. So that's the guild ID that we want the icon for. And then we're going to pass in the guild.icon property. And in case you don't know what that property is, the guild icon property is the hash. It's a string. And it's just the hash representation of the image, okay? So it's just basically like the name of the image itself, if you think about it. So you pass that in, and then we add .png at the end, and we should be able to see the images now. So let's go back to the menu page, and hopefully we don't have any issues. It says invalid source prop. Okay, so here's the next issue, right? It's complaining about how we're trying to use an image from a remote source, but that host name, right, that remote source is not configured, so we need to actually configure it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go inside the next.config.js file, and this is where we will configure anything with Next.js. Okay, we're going to configure the images, and we're going to set the domains. And this is just an array of host names. So for example, we want to use images or assets from the Discord CDN. So we'll just type in the host name. And if you look right over here, cdn.discordapp.com is the host name. So we'll just pass that in. And all we got to do now is just restart our application. And once we do that, we should be able to see our images. And there we go. So you can see that these are all of my guilds that I'm in, that I have admin permissions for, and that the bot is also in as well. So BMW server, Audi server, test server, Music King, and GitHub Gods. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's pretty much most of, the guild menu. The only thing that we'll have to do, of course, is we'll implement a search feature later. So there'll be like an input field, and you could search for the guild, and it just pop up, because we might have a lot of guilds too. Additionally, you can also do pagination too if you have tons of guilds, though that might be a little bit difficult. Okay, and it's only difficult because of the way that Discord gives us back all of the guilds. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. And then we'll also need to make it so that when we click on it, when we click on these menu items, right, it's supposed to navigate us to the dashboard page, and that's something that we haven't built yet. So what we'll do is we'll actually build that in the next episode, and then after we finish building the dashboard page and implementing everything, we'll stitch together the menu page and the dashboard page. So that's gonna be it for this video. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace out.